Good evening, everyone. My goodness, it has been a really exciting day. I am very aware that I am what's standing between you and your dinner and your cocktails. So I promise that I'm going to make the next half hour super interesting, and I'm glad that was so funny because now I'm the woman up here making it happen. So today what we're going to talk about together is this idea of tackling humanity's grand challenges. We're all here together with nasscom because we're leaders. We're leaders in our industry, we're leaders in our communities, and we're really dedicated to thinking about how are we going to build a future together. Now, I'm a molecular biologist by training, so when I think about the future, the number one thing that I'm thinking about, of course, is climate change. I'm thinking about the existential threat not just to our planet and to the living things on it, but to our communities and even to our businesses. You can expect to see lots more disruption in the years to come thanks to climate change. Now, I like to think that the last couple of years of the pandemic have been a dress rehearsal for how we're going to be tackling this crisis. How resilient are our businesses? How much trust do we have in our institutions? And what kind of leaders do we want to be when we show up? These are the questions that I think we've come here together as a community to answer in these days. Now, I know earlier today you had a chance to hear from a futurist. Futurists are just people who, for a living, think about the future, and we have a whole bunch of tools and frameworks that we do to do this. But, as we all know, in our daily lives, something is always on fire. Do you agree with that? We're always so busy tackling the next crisis that it's hard to take a breath and really think about the future. So after this day of amazing content that we've had today, I want to invite you for just a minute to take a breath and think about the future that you are going to build. You can close your eyes if this helps, and I'm going to count a few of my heartbeats to give you a chance to think about that. What does your preferred future look like? How does it feel to live in that future? Who's in that future? What are you doing there? These are important questions that we have to ask in order to make our futures imaginable, desirable, and actionable. That's what we want to do. Now, I get to do this type of work quite often because I'm a member of a wonderful community called Singularity University. Singularity University was founded in 2008 as a place for multidisciplinary, action-oriented leaders like you to come together to figure out how to make the world a better place and how to build billion-dollar businesses while doing it. Tomorrow morning, you're going to get to hear from Dr. Peter Diamandis, who is one of Singularity University's co-founders. So make sure you tune into that talk tomorrow because Peter is a really fantastic future thinker. And since 2008, Singularity University has impacted more than 250,000 leaders around the world. Again, with this idea about making the world better through technology, through people, and through business. We're also excited to let you know that the Singularity community in India is growing. So if this is something that you're interested in, please do reach out. I know we're interacting very closely with nasscom as a community. And the reason that this type of collaboration is so important today is because, yes, we're at a moment of unprecedented challenge, which I showed you with climate change, but we're also at a moment of amazing opportunity. And that is thanks to exponential technologies, which have become more and more mature and more powerful just in the last few years, which is why the future feels like it's coming at us so much faster than it was before. Now again, I'm a biologist, so I tend to think a lot about biotechnology. And what's really special about this moment is that thanks to our exponential technologies, the boundaries between the living and the non-living world are breaking down. That is true with the human body and health and medicine. It's true with food, it's true with energy, it's true with a lot of really amazing verticals, which means, of course, that tomorrow is going to be very different from today. So what I want to do is give you a sense today of how I think about those preferred futures and give you some tools to keep in your pockets about how to think about that. This is important because there is a global bioeconomy that's being built today. Several countries have put together very specific plans about how to grow their bioeconomies, the parts of their industries that rely on life sciences and other exponential technologies for all kinds of things. So Germany, China, the UK, the United States, the EU all have very formal plans about how to grow their bioeconomies. Now, what about India? That should be our question today. So India's bioeconomy is strong today, but it has a lot of room to get even stronger. So this is a really exciting opportunity because through biotechnologies, we have the chance to do things like have more abundance of input materials, have more resilient supply chains, and also to use these tools and technologies to solve really big questions. So looking again more closely at India, today India's bioeconomy is largely focused on pharma, which means that there's opportunity for growth in several other segments. Now, of course, we expect the COVID bioeconomy to trickle away a bit, right? Thank goodness. Can I say that? I hope we can all agree that this was one sort of thing that we wanted to be disrupted out of. That's where we're looking. But what's really important here is this idea of growth. So BIRAC here in India has projected that the Indian bioeconomy could grow by 5x by 2030, yielding an industry that's worth $300 billion, US dollars. So that's a really important thing. It means that there's opportunity for your industry, whatever your industry is, to be a player in this new future. It also means there's amazing workforce opportunities. If you have kids who are in college, talk to them about being a biologist, or heck, have them talk to me. I would be thrilled to talk to them. Because so many jobs of the future, which haven't even been invented yet, are going to come out of this space. So how can you really think about this future? I want to share with you a framework that at Singularity University we use to get our minds around the possibilities here, and we call it digital biology. So here's why we call it that. Now, just in case you all don't spend all day, every day thinking about DNA and biology the way I do, my husband's a biologist, our son, this is all he hears about all the time. Here's a little refresher for you. So just as a reminder, all life on Earth is related, including humans. All life on Earth is made of cells, including you. You're made up of trillions and trillions of these cells. And if we zoom into the cell, say a human cell, we get down to the place called the nucleus, which is where life on Earth organizes the information that it needs in order to build and run a living thing, right? You can think of this as the operating manual of a living thing. I love that she is doing this while I'm talking about DNA and biology. Spectacular. Okay. So in humans, we've got, right? Yes. You all get to watch her. I just have to glance at her out of the corner of my eye. So we have in humans we have 23 pairs of this information that's organized into things we call chromosomes. And if we zoom in further in that chromosome, eventually we get all the way down to the famous DNA double helix, which is made up of 4 chemical building blocks that for short we call A, C, T, and G. Now computers store information as zeros and ones. Life on Earth, all life on Earth, stores information as A, C, T, G. And it's the order of those letters that makes an organism what it is. It shows how it grows, how it develops. And so humans, just for reference, we've got about, let's call it 3 billion of these A, C's, T's, and G's. And every human on Earth is 99.9% identical at the DNA level to every other human. I'm from California, so I'm going to give you a California moment. I'm going to say that one more time. Every human being on Earth is 99.9% identical to every other human at the DNA level, which to me means that all these reasons that we kill each other, it's not hard-coded in our DNA, right? We have the chance to behave in the way we want to be. So ACTs, Gs, the order contains the information. And the way that we get to that information is by digitizing what we've got. And it advanced on my slide, but not on the main screen. Could you move forward a slide, please? There we go. So when I think about DNA information, which I do a lot because I'm that kind of geek and it makes me really happy, I don't actually think about a double helix or a chemical molecule. I think about this. I think about code. Because remember, as soon as we can digitize something, then it can ride Moore's law, right? And we can take advantage of exponential advances in computing in order to start doing really amazing things. Let me show you an example of this. So the order of ACTG is called a DNA sequence. And the technology that we use to read out those A's, T's, and G's is called DNA sequencing. And it turns out that DNA sequencing is itself an exponential technology like computing. So what I'm showing you here on the screen is the price performance curve of DNA sequencing. And I'm also, for reference, showing you Moore's law. Now, I know it's late in the day, but since Moore's law is a straight line, that means the y-axis is logarithmic. Everyone's excited that we got a little extra math in today, right? You're welcome. I'm delighted as well. Okay, so back in 2001, you might remember the publication of the Draft Human Genome Project, or the Draft Human Genome Sequence. It was published simultaneously by two groups, a large government consortium, and then a private company called Singularity. So back in 2001, this draft took 10 years to put together and cost about $2.7 billion US. Now, what you can see from the graph is between 2001 and the year 2008, the price performance of DNA sequencing approximately followed Moore's law. It got cheaper the way you would expect based on Moore's law. And then in 2008, two things happened. The computation changed that does this technology, and the chemistry changed. They gave the new technology the unfortunate name of next generation sequencing. When the third generation came out, what do you think they called it? Next generation sequencing. Be very careful when you name a technology. It has implications. So what you can see is after 2008, the price performance of DNA sequencing began radically outperforming Moore's law up until the year 2019, the last year we have pretty solid numbers for, when now the price of sequencing a whole human genome went down to $900 US, which in the United States, where I live, is cheaper than an X-ray, which says a lot of things about a lot of things, and we can just leave it there. So what this means is over 20 years, the cost of sequencing a human genome went from costing as much as a fancy fighter jet to costing as much as 2 VIP tickets to a Taylor Swift concert. Now, if you wanted to do DNA sequencing just of the part of your genome that does stuff, which is a terrible way to put it, but it's called exome sequencing, that's about $200 US today. That's the price of your Spotify account for the year. And there are lots of products out there that are working even cheaper than that. And frankly, a lot of us expect this price to go even lower. I've been predicting for a few years that we were getting down to cost to the consumer of about $100 US. And sure enough, last fall, Illumina, which is one of the leaders in DNA sequencing, launched a new machine that, has got the $200 genome. And another company called Ultima Genomics is expected to come out of stealth with a $100 human genome. At this price point, why would you not do this? There's actually answers to that, which we can talk about, but it's a really important point. We're talking about, I live in California. Pretty soon it's going to be cheaper to sequence a human genome than it will be for me to flush the toilet because water is so expensive in California. That's the future that we're heading to. Now, back in 2001, this is what a human genome sequencer looked like, or a genome sequencer looked like. It was about the size of a refrigerator, cost about $1 million US. We still have $1 million genome sequencers today. They're incredibly powerful, much more powerful than this. But we also have genome sequencers that look like this. This is a handheld DNA sequencer from a company called Oxford Nanopore in the UK. It plugs into a laptop by USB. There's also another version called the Smidge Ion, which interfaces with a smartphone. So that means wherever you are, whether you're in the field, whether you're in the clinic, whether you're in a classroom, you can have a DNA sequencer in your pocket. Costs about $1,000 US. So again, this is really changing the landscape of what becomes possible, and it also opens up a lot of really important questions, which hopefully are rattling around in your brain right now, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk about over drinks later. So this is how we have digitized DNA information. And it turns out we're actually really good at digitizing a lot more of the signals of life. And as a result, again, biotechnology and the life sciences are riding this exponential wave into more and more powerful applications. One of those applications, of course, is healthcare, and you've heard from some folks today about how healthcare is changing and how we expect it to change over the next decade. So, in today's model, you wait until you have a headache to go see your doctor, she does an MRI, she finds a tumor in your brain, that's it. But what we're talking about is a future in which we have personalized and potentially predictive healthcare that is based not just on our DNA, but also on a lot of the other biological signals about the things we put into our bodies and the things that come out of our bodies. And you guys are lucky that you have some leaders in this space here at this conference who I'm sure you'll get to hear from much more. Because what we're talking about is a transition from sick care to health care, true health care. Now, if this is interesting to you, I want to invite you to come see us tomorrow. Anu and I are going to be doing a fireside chat tomorrow about longevity. So my question for you is, do you want to live longer and healthier? Because we all know that living longer isn't enough. And so if you are interested in this, come to our fireside chat tomorrow, because there's some really big questions here that I would love to get into, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So excitingly, there are lots of applications in the DNA space. So healthcare is kind of an obvious one. COVID, that happened. That was a big thing. A lot of the early sequencing work on that was done in these handheld DNA devices. And there's some really interesting applications that I'm seeing going on around the world where people are doing things like putting DNA sequences in the sewer system so that when a disease starts ticking up, there's a signal that somebody in government can recognize. This, for example, is how New York City suddenly noticed that there was a lot of polio virus in sewage samples, which was a clue that somebody needed to do something. Because polio, right? Very scary. But there's lots of other really interesting applications that also take advantage of this, which don't have anything to do with healthcare. So for example, I've seen interesting applications where folks are fighting environmental crime using DNA sequencing, or even fighting food fraud, for example, in the seafood industry, again using DNA as a system that enables you to track and label the living things in our food system. So this is shoring up consumer confidence in our industries. So I watch spaces like this a lot, and I'm always looking for unusual partnerships. If I see a yogurt company talking to a skincare company, I know something's up, and I know to pay attention, and it probably has something to do with the microbiome, which is one of my favorite things out there. I love bacteria. But when you are scanning the future to figure out what's coming, look for these unusual partnerships. It's a great clue that something interesting is going on. So let's go back to the major threat that I highlighted at the beginning of this talk, which is climate change. Let's think specifically for a minute, just a couple of ways that climate change is going to be affecting India, right? So we've got rising water levels as well as drought. So drought and flooding, best of both worlds. And when that happens, we see upticks in types of diseases that happen. We know that extreme weather impacts our supply chains. We should expect to see a lot more of that in future. And also, this type of drought and flooding also impacts India's food production capabilities, right? So we're talking about potential for malnutrition or lower food security, very important. We also know that there's more heat, which of course leads to fires. Fires are very bad news for a whole lot of reasons. Heat-related illness is on the rise. So this last year's spring heat wave impacted 70% of India. Highs were around 45 degrees C. And remember, it's been estimated that something like half of the Indian workforce works outdoors, right? And 70% of the country, 70% of households in India have no air conditioning. So this means that we can expect to see far more heat-related impacts on our bodies, on our communities, on our foods, on our supply chains, all of these things. We should also expect to see things like mosquitoes in places that we didn't expect. I don't know if any of you are watching that new HBO show, All of Us, the sort of fungus zombie apocalypse thing. Yeah, that's a thing. Fungus becoming much more infectious. Spoiler alert. So if you're working in drug development, get on that. But again, we've got to expect to see changing disease profiles in future. And of course, our heart health, our lung health, and our children's development are all going to be affected by these changes, which is why biotechnology is so important. And I want to encourage you to start looking for ways in which the biotechnologies are touching your daily lives and also your industries. So here is the big take-home message from today. Biology is technology. It's not two separate things. You don't just need silicon in order to have technology. In fact, what we're seeing is some really cool applications of using life's building blocks in order to build innovative solutions. This is really important because when we look to nature, we're taking advantage of the 4 billion years of innovation that evolution has carried out on this planet. We don't have to be the smartest things out there and figure it out. Nature has already done a lot of that work for us. Let me tell you a couple of stories about how we're seeing that roll out today. So, for example, thanks to the pandemic, you've seen firsthand what I mean when I say biology is technology. And that has to do with RNA vaccines. So the way an RNA vaccine works, just as a quick reminder, is that some very clever researchers grabbed, it was an RNA sequence, you can think of RNA as being like compiled DNA code, took that sequence and figured out how to get just a piece of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and to get the instructions for making just that one little piece. That's what's in an RNA vaccine. And when they put that needle in your arm, that means your body is the hardware that's booting up the software that that RNA is. Your body makes a little piece of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, just a little piece. That's why these vaccines can't give you COVID. Your immune system trains on that, and then it's ready for action when you do actually encounter the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Now, what's interesting is that this type of technology, mRNA vaccines, were not invented in response to COVID. This technology is more than a decade old, and it's been in work for cancer vaccines for more than a decade. And in fact, today we're seeing some really interesting clinical trials in which Pfizer and BioNTech are claiming that they can go from a patient biopsy to a personalized anti-cancer vaccine in 4 to 6 weeks. If that holds up through larger trials, that is an absolute game changer. And we know that RNA vaccine technology is not just being used for COVID, not just for cancer, but for a lot of other infectious diseases and even for things like agriculture and some other really interesting applications. So keep your eyes peeled. This is going to be a really exciting innovation space. The digital biology paradigm means that we are empowered to be engineers of living things and to find ways to harness nature's solutions to our benefits. And like I mentioned, the paradigm says that anything that we can do with computer code, we can also do with DNA code. So for example, if we want to write DNA code from scratch, that's called synthetic biology. That is also an exponential technology. It needs to get cheaper, but people are working on it, so that's good news. We can move big blocks of code around, just like coders do in a computer. If we do that, we can do that within an organism, or we can move those blocks outside of an organism to another species. That's called genetic engineering. We've known how to do that since the 1970s. But there's a new set of technologies, new like last 8-10 years, that are really getting a lot of spotlight. And these are called gene editing technologies. The most famous one you've probably heard of, it's called CRISPR, but there's a whole bunch of these gene editing and base editing technologies that empower people to debug the source code of life one letter at a time, and to do it precisely and permanently. It's a game changer. And again, expect to see more of this in the coming years. I'm really pleased to say that India is taking a leadership role in supporting its bioeconomy through agriculture by setting guidelines that clearly reflect this new era of gene editing. This is not GMOs. This is something fundamentally different, and I'm really pleased to report that India is looking at it that way. So well done, because what that means is that the innovation can come to a favorable regulatory environment, because we want our products to be efficient, we want them to be safe, and we want them to be trusted. And regulation is a big part of that. So since DNA is both a coding language and a parts list, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. How lucky are we? You can take those parts out, you can swap them around, you can rewire them in new ways for new functions, or you can tweak them in order to build something new. So you can think of DNA kind of like the chassis of a car, where depending on whether you want a Jeep or whether you want a sports car, you can put different pieces in. So we can add modules to a living thing, like a yeast or a bacterium, where they can make something new, like a nutrient or a drug or light, something like that. We can improve something that nature has already developed and innovated on for a long time. And we can even put brand new human-designed functionalities into living things, which is a really exciting thing. That's like thinking about, again, biology as technology, a living thing being like a 3D printer. I remember someone once telling me, oh, we need 3D printers for humans. And I was like, we already have those. They're called mothers. Already a DNA printer. So how do we use that technology in order to leapfrog, as it were, to these solutions that we desperately need? So where do all these modules come from? The answer, of course, is today it's nature. And those are proteins. So proteins are kind of like the machines that carry out the various businesses and jobs of being alive. And it used to be that if you wanted to figure out what a protein did, you had to figure out what its shape was. Because in biology, structure is function. That's one of our major things. And back in my day, and I'm not even that old, it could take you 6 to 8 years to figure out the shape of a protein and what it does. Last summer, AlphaFold, which was a company that came out of Google, published the structures, of every protein known to humans, 200 million of them. So now, instead of 6 to 8 years figuring something out, it's 150 milliseconds to get you started. That is a game changer, and it is an amazing example of how AI and humans working together are really going to revolutionize the future, because now we know what nature has been doing here on Earth. And just a month ago, there was a new language programming algorithm, a new AI that actually came up with new, never before seen, never evolved proteins that the ones that they tested behaved the way the algorithm expected. Now, I was a bit surprised by this. The company that wrote this other AI was Salesforce, not a biology company. So again, when we're looking for these unusual partnerships, keep our eyes open, because now we have a whole new way of coding entirely new to planet Earth functions and living things. Spectacular. Keep your eyes open. So what we're talking about now is this growing bioeconomy future. And India is positioning itself to be a global leader in the coming biotech aid. So you've got 63 bioincubators across India and 4 BIRAC regional centers of excellence. This is happening all over India. And they're doing everything from entrepreneurship development all the way to successful businesses, funding, business models, all of these things. Basically, everything your Indian entrepreneurs are going to need in order to excel in this future. And excitingly, there's all these pathways to using these innovations to actually solving India's grand challenges and also the grand challenges of the world. And so I'm talking about a future in which living things, our 3D printers, our computers, our sensors, our power plants, which means that we are using life in order to make all the food, fuel, and fiber that we need for a sustainable and resilient existence on Earth, with so many people and so much challenge to our resources. And this is going to be true not just here on Earth, but also elsewhere. Ask me about Mars. I would be delighted to talk with you about it. So again, looking forward, this is about sustainability. So where will this coming biotech aid take us? Hopefully to resilience and sustainability, for example, through a circular bioeconomy. Now, India has the chance to be a leader here. And this isn't, again, some California hippie thing I'm talking about. This is about the chance to make a great deal of money and to be positioning India to be a global leader. So when we have these circular bioeconomies, we're not just protecting the environment, we're also leading to socioeconomic development, to education, to jobs, to the expansion of industries. And of course, we have ways of supporting India's growing bioeconomy in ways that are going to be very beneficial at a lot of levels. At the same time, though, this is how we're going to tackle the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And there's a whole bunch of them here that have been mapped out that I think are really powerful business opportunities as well to ensure that we're leaving not just a planet that our children can love, but also jobs and dreams and all of these things that they can build together through biotech. So at the beginning of this talk, I asked you to take a moment to picture your preferred future. So now that you guys know the kinds of stuff that I keep my eyes on and I'm excited about, let me tell you what my preferred futures are. So I envision a world, a future that has a clean, healthy environment that is diverse, that not only supports humans, but really enhances our lives. I'm a scuba diver, so I think about clean, diverse, vibrant ocean ecosystems that feed us, but also keep the planet's systems moving. I think about healthy food that's sustainable, and there's enough of it for everybody who needs it. And by the way, it's delicious, because of course that's what we really care about. And I know Indians care about food, because amazing. And we also care about long, healthy lives with the people that we love. And this is what I picture. This is what I'm raising my son to believe we can build together. But as you can imagine, this is complicated. There are a lot of pieces that go into building a future. And so our job as leaders is to find the interfaces among all of these various pieces to figure out, where can I contribute? Where can my business lead? Where can my business disrupt? And how do I, as a leader, want to show up in this future? So I want to finish us up with a quote from one of my heroes. This is Christiana Figueres. She's from Costa Rica. She was the former executive secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. This was a woman who was out there ringing the bell on climate change when nobody wanted to listen to how bad things were going to get. And this is what Christiana says about leadership. She says, if you do not control the complex landscape of a challenge, and you rarely do, like, let's be honest with each other, the most powerful thing that you can do is to change how you behave in that landscape, using yourself as a catalyst for overall change. Now remember, to a scientist, what a catalyst is. A catalyst is something that makes change happen without getting burnt out, without getting used up. And so that's the last idea that I want to leave you with today. As leaders, as part of the nasscom community, you have the opportunity to be making change happen for decades. Let's lean on each other in order to make that happen in the ways that are most beneficial to as many people, businesses, industries, and communities as possible. And I'm really looking forward to being on that journey with you. So this is me. This is how we can stay in touch. I would love for you to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just tell me that we met here. There are a lot of random people on LinkedIn, and I don't want to pay attention to them. I want to pay attention to you. And of course, follow me on social media, because I share a lot of information, news articles, podcasts, books, stories, science fiction, anything I see out there in the world that I think will help us all picture the future together in a way that is as positive and empowering as possible. Thank you very much. It's time for dinner and cocktails.
For more interesting content, like, comment, and subscribe to our nasscom YouTube channel.